I'd love to ask you, notion of having the strategic goal being creating revenue back into Telefónica. When you invest in a startup, do you see the potential of that startup to become a customer or building something that Telefónica can then leverage to get revenue from elsewhere? In this episode, Bruno from Wayra reveals how Telefónica's venture arm has generated €1 billion in revenue through an approach that breaks all the rules of traditional venture.
We are investing about 10 to 15 million per year, and we are generating more than 100 million. So we generate 10 times more revenue than we invest.
Their secret, a dedicated team with one surprising mission.
We always assign to our portfolio companies someone in our value creation team who is responsible for capturing the business opportunities. It's almost like internal sales for the portfolio company.
After 15 years evolving from corporate accelerator to independent investment firm, Bruno shares the counterintuitive principle that's made it all work.
The ego behind. Let them shine. By working with us, one thing we can give to people in the organizations, in the corporations that want to take risks, is to give them a place to shine.
If you're building, investing in, or selling to large enterprises, this episode reveals the hidden value that most corporate investors are completely missing. Join us for this revealing conversation on the European VC podcast.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with Ace Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. Today, we're doing another CVC episode for the first time without my dear friend Jeppe, who is our in-house CVC expert. But he decided to go to Italy for a bit of winter holidays, which I guess the rest of Denmark is doing as well right now. I am not. I'm here talking to you, Bruno. So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Normally, I always just start by giving an introduction, but I have shied away from doing that here on the CVC episodes because sometimes it's a bit more complex to get it right. So for that reason, I'll let you do the intro of yourself and the firm Wayra.
So my name is Bruno. I've been with Wayra for 5 years. Wayra is the CVC arm of Telefónica. Telefónica is a large telco with operations mainly in Europe, Spain, UK, and Germany. You might know by the brand O2 in the UK and in Germany, and then everywhere in LATAM. So Brazil and the rest of almost all the countries in Latin America.
This focus, is that driven by where Telefónica is the most active?
Exactly. We have our presence mimics exactly Telefónica's presence. So in all the countries where we have operations, we are there as well.
Before we really dive into everything about your principles and learnings for building the corporate entity, I just want to ask you, and I asked you this before we started recording as well, when you say corporate clienting, what does that mean?
Our main objective is to generate business opportunities between our portfolio companies and Telefónica. It's quite broad, so it can be reselling the products. So Telefónica will resell startup products. Sometimes they will co-develop something. Sometimes Telefónica will be a customer. Sometimes the startup will be a customer. So it's quite open, the scope, but it is to develop a fruitful business opportunity between portfolio companies and Telefónica. That's our core objective. Obviously, we are investors as well, so we balance this strategic return with financial return.
You made a note in in our written notes for this that said 1 billion euro in revenues for Telefonica. Is that the overarching goal, or what does that sentence mean?
That we just kind of, and that is where we are right now. At the end of 2024, that's what we reached. So a billion euros revenue for Telefonica from those partnerships between Telefonica and our portfolio companies.
We always ask the question: are you based on the budget, or you're an LP structure? Could you talk a bit about that, because you're actually both?
Let's say our main fund, our Wayra fund, is a balance sheet investments, a budget structure, and that's where we started. Over time, other group companies also wanted to have their own funds to focus more from our main thesis to something that was more specific to a group company, and some of them have an LP structure. So we have a mixture of both.
Can you share a bit how many funds do you have under management then, and the focuses of each?
So we have one main fund. I would call it the Wayra fund. That's our balance sheet investments, and with this investments in all those global investments, but focus on those countries I mentioned. We manage a fund for Vivo. Vivo is our telco in Brazil, one of our biggest. So the 60 million euro fund for them. They want to focus. They want to invest in a startup that can help them achieve those goals. And then we also have a fund in Spain for a group company called Telefónica Seguros. So an insurtech fund called the Opera Ventures that we also manage for Telefónica Seguros.
How come you've decided to run those funds under different brand names than Wayra?
Well, they are very linked to their corporate sponsor. Telefónica uses different brands in the different countries, right? So too in UK, in Germany, for example, it is Vivo in Brazil. In Brazil, we wanted that funds to be very linked to Vivo. It invests in companies that can really work with Vivo in a large transformation project they have. So we wanted to leverage that brand. In a way, for that specific market, that specific thesis, Vivo brand was extremely relevant. Our brand is there, so it's in partnership with us, but we wanted to leverage Vivo brand as well.
And then stage-wise, your late seed to Series B, with Series A as your sweet spot, which correlates or matches super well what everyone has said on the podcast, that is probably the best space to be in if you're a CVC. But you can talk a bit. You were about to add something to it.
Yes, we started investing in earlier stages, in the early years of Wayra. We've been around for almost 15 years. The learning is that to be able, with the angle of generating strategic returns for Telefónica as well, too early stage becomes quite difficult. I mean, the companies are not ready to work with Telefónica at that moment, and sometimes once they are and they evolve, eventually the focus or the strategy has shifted or they pivoted. So it was more challenging to get those results. We wouldn't have reached the 1 billion euro revenue if we had focused on early stage. So moving to a bit later, Series A as a sweet spot, some Series B. We can go anywhere. We can go anywhere. There's not very fixed, but this is where most of the investments happen. It's around Series A. So they have a product market fit. They have a couple corporate clients. Typically, if they're B2B, they are ready or they are close to being ready to work with us. I think that's the best moment, and when we can grow together.
And then as we've said, you're investing globally, but in those companies that are willing to operate in the countries where Telefónica has their presence. So, in other words, you can go outside of those countries, but primarily that is the bulk of your investments.
Yes, we have investment teams in all the countries. So we have local teams. At this stage, we invest a lot still happens locally. We can invest outside the footprint, and we have invested outside the footprint, but we must be able to capture that connection between the companies and Telefónica. So it's either something that is geography agnostic, or companies that are, for example, expanding into the UK or want our help to expand in Latin America and so on. So they should be either doing or having in their roadmap expansion into one of our geographies.
And then the vertical question, which is obviously super tied to this strategic goal of creating revenue for Telefónica. You say you're agnostic, but obviously tech focused.
Yes.
I'd love to ask you, and pull back the curtain a bit on this notion of having the strategic goal being creating revenue back into Telefónica. When you invest in a startup, do you see the potential of that startup to become a customer? Or do you see the potential of that startup building something that Telefónica can then leverage to get revenue from elsewhere?
I mean, the startup to become a customer, it happens, and but I think it's not the most often. It's for sure not the most often. It's usually products that we will bring jointly to the market, or that Telefónica will resell in some cases. That's what I mean. So agnostic in that sense, it can be quite broad. So, for example, we have made several investments in health tech. With that first impression, I mean, has nothing to do with telco, which is not true. So we health tech is one of our core areas we're investing, because we develop products. We have one thing that the telcos have in general is a lot of market reach, right? So we are a very interesting channel for a startup, both in B2B and in B2C. So all companies and all individuals, they have a relationship with one telco. So with telcos, you can reach everyone. That's part of the value that we bring. And then it's in some cases, very often as well, we have a product that we want to add new features. We cooperate and collaborate with a startup to add features to our product. Sometimes we package all under our product, and it's transparent to the customer, and they eventually don't even know where it's packaged in one product. Sometimes it's kind of add-on that they have the relationship directly with the startup. So it's very, very flexible model.
Can we just unpack that €1 billion number? Because what is the entire revenue size of Telefónica? And I'm asking because I'm trying to gauge, you have 260 million under management on balance sheet from the mothership, so to say. You've created 1 billion back to the company as revenue, which one might, call 4x, but then of course there's not 100%.
Yeah, so that's the unpack that a bit. So we generate impact on different ways, right? Part of it, let's say half of it, is through new revenues, right? As I mentioned, product will resell or partner. A substantial part of it is things that we are going to acquire from the startup. So we are clients, and we'll acquire technology or products. I mean, it doesn't. So we tend to measure in detail the first part. The second part is quite tricky, because actually you're measuring what you were spending. It always generates a little bit of a debate if we should do that. So we don't measure that part. We measure how many contracts, how many startups working with us, but we don't measure the actual cost. We measure the revenue. I mean, it is a several billion euro revenue business. When one of my large operators have like 9 billion per year, and then we have a few in the different countries. So it is relatively small in that sense, but it's significant in some particular segments that we are working together. So it's mostly focused, especially when I think about the UK. It's mainly focused on B2B. So in other countries more B2C. So it is relevant in those issues. And this 260, we built that over 15 years of investment. So perhaps a different way of thinking is that we are investing about 10 to 15 million per year in the most recent years, and we are generating more than 100 million. So we generate 10 times more revenue than we invest.
Let's unpack that a little bit as well, because then now you're saying something interesting, because you're investing 10 to 15 million per year. What is the Wayra team size like?
Total about 70 people, a large team. However,
17 or 0?
No, 70.
70.
Although a small part of that team is the investment team, 20% of that team is the investment team. And then we have teams working with the business units doing business development. One thing that we do on top of what we do for Telefónica, we have other partners and other clients as well. More innovation services, innovation consulting. That's included in this team size. We consider Telefónica our main, and it's our sponsor, but it's a client in a way. And we replicate those services to some other partners.
The reason I asked it was I knew your team was much larger than what a fund would be if it deployed definitely. 15 million per year.
No, definitely.
And I'd love to dig into that a little bit in terms of understanding then what type of beast is a corporate VC firm, because clearly there's a lot of activities going on inside that are not just investing. So maybe you could share a bit of, now you gave the highlights in the numbers that are allocated to different activities. But if you come to this from a co-investor perspective, what does it mean to get Telefónica on as a co-investor? Or from a founder perspective, what does it mean to get you as an investor?
Yeah. So I can unpack this on two core activities and then perhaps divide it a little more. So if I look at the investment team, we have the proper investment team, the investors, and the value creation team. The investment team working on sourcing new deals, investments, and working with the startups after. But we always assign to our portfolio companies someone in our value creation team who is responsible for capturing, for making sure that they capture the business opportunities that exist. It's almost like internal sales for the portfolio company, which then will work with the business units. And what quite often starts with one, because we started based on existing need from one of the business units, can develop into multiple opportunities with others. They also look, we have people on that doing this in the UK, in Germany, in Spain. They also look in the other geographies. So have companies that we invested in the UK, made a lot of sense for the business here, and now they are working with us in LATAM, in Spain, in Germany. And so this is in the investment team and the value creation team. We have the teams that work mainly for Telefónica. If I think about team size, this would be about 20 people, which is typically more than a CVC of this size would have. However, we need to have local teams in all those countries. I mean, for the stage we invest, we need investors in all countries. And for capturing the business opportunities, we need people with local relationships. I cannot, from the UK, develop the relationships that I need to find opportunities and develop opportunities in Brazil or in Argentina or in Colombia. And then we have people working with our external clients that is on top. It's more, in a way, more similar to a consulting business that we develop over time. A lot from demands from clients as well that we see. We're quite early players in the CVC space, or we started as a corporate accelerator in 2011, right? So it's still quite early players, and then over time we work with some Telefónica clients that wanted support on that. Very often, clients look at telcos for innovation because of the technology angle as well. So we started working with them. So that's a parallel business line for us.
No, but it's super interesting in terms of understanding who you engage with. From a VC perspective, whenever I talk to emerging managers, oftentimes the fund size is a bit contingent on how much they can raise, more than maybe the market opportunity that they believe that's there. And when I look at or hear the 10 to 15 million per year number, I would think that maybe there's a lot of opportunity out there that you can't go for, but that would actually be a great match for someone with as big exposure as Telefónica.
So we evolved over time. So Wayra started as a corporate area. Right? It's a corporate area of Telefónica. It started as a corporate accelerator. We evolved into CVC. We had fresh capital from Telefónica every year. Then at some point, relatively recently, a few years ago, we moved from that model to being independent, still fully owned by Telefónica, but an operational independent group company. So we're not a corporate area anymore. We were a group company. That meant that we started looking elsewhere as well for sources of funding. Right before, as a corporate area, our only source of funding was Telefónica. That's when we started creating funds for other group companies. Because the way we grow now is by increasing our assets under management. So we started looking internally initially. That was the first step, and then we launched a couple of funds. We reached this stage with the Telefónica investments, the initial investment that they did over several years, that we created a self-sustainable structure. We can even if with a large team, we can recycle our capital, generate enough returns, and keep reinvesting without needing additional capital from Telefónica. But it's difficult to grow in that model because you just have organic growth. So we start doing that with group companies. Then we expanded into leveraging Telefónica's capital to create a fund that is less strict to the Telefónica strategy, but still very, very close to the industry, and launching an industry fund where we can multiply our capital, bring other corporates together, typically corporates, and with an industry fund. So that's our kind of next step. That's what I'm working on actually right now, is to structure and fundraise for that. And then in parallel, we expanded beyond group companies in the dedicated mono LP funds. So with an offer to, which is sometimes referred as CVC as a service. So using our investment team to manage a dedicated mono LP fund for other corporations. So those are the two growth avenues that we see to leverage and expand our assets under management. So but it all comes from this evolution from being a corporate area into being an independent company, and then evolving into for internal capital and now for external capital.
I want to ask you, because this is something I've been talking to a couple of people setting up CVCs or joining CVCs about the right incentives in a CVC. What do you see as the best levers to pull when you think about incentives, and where do you see, do you think it's best done in a very market conform manner to normal venture, so to say? Or do you think that now you have to recognize very much that CVC is a different beast and we have strategic agenda points and so on and so forth? We don't own the management company. And for that reason, you really need to be creative and think outside of the box when you're putting together the incentive program for employees. And here we talk about the investment team, of course.
It's an eternal debate. I think we have not fully cracked the code, and probably none of the CVCs have. If it's too market-based, you may miss out some strategic opportunities. And some strategic opportunities will align less with the financial return that you would have on a pure market-based financial CVC with a market-based compensation structure. So I think it's actually finding the right balance and being able to eventually identify what you're investing for financial reasons and makes a lot of financial sense, and what you are investing for more strategic returns, well, where the return will be elsewhere. So different ways of doing that that we are exploring. Either, for example, based on that strategic metrics, your hurdle rate reduces because the company is capturing return elsewhere. So that's a model that can work. Or you on investment that is very clear for a strategic basis, you remove that when you are from your carry base, for example. So that is that's actually the discussions we are currently having on how to align that.
Like, so you have a base salary, then do you then have a bonus element and then a carry element, or do you purely have?
We are on that transition. So managing our internal funds, we have a corporate compensation model. So base salary, bonus, and some long incentive component, but linked to the corporate scheme on the metrics that we achieve with the CVC, but a corporate scheme. Moving into a Telefónica group capital, but not our own corporate capital, we kept the same model. And right now, the big discussion is how can we bridge, because we're moving into third-party capital. It is a requirement. That is the conversation we are on. So we're still debating. We want to do. The debate is how to do, how to implement, how to align, and several conversations at multiple levels that need to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure. Bruno, you've been incredibly successful, and the organization has existed for a long time. I'd love to ask you some of the principles or core learnings that have kind of both driven this, but also come from being around for so long.
If I think on myself and my career at Wayra, I've been with Wayra for 5 years. Before I was an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, I was always seeing in B2B and always selling and partnering with large organizations, right? However, before being an entrepreneur, I was a management consultant. And as a management consultant, I was kind of working with large corporations, even Telefónica. So I knew how to kind of navigate. But being there, having this knowledge of both sides, I think it was super important, for me at least. Our team typically, a big part of our team does not come from the corporate. We like to have founders. We like to have investors that join the team, not to have like the corporate traits. Let's put it that way. So I think being an entrepreneur was a game changer. It was important especially as a consultant, both as a consultant and as a founder. I worked in the telco industry. Understanding the industry was also important, right? You have to understand founders, understand the ecosystem. However, to find the real good and interesting problems that you want to solve, it's important to understand the industry. I think more and more as the ecosystem evolves and there's more competition as well, the low-hanging fruits are gone, or there are fewer of them, right? So having this kind of industry knowledge, I think, helped a lot. And then the third one, which might be even a little bit more unexpected, the ego behind, especially as a CVC. You're there for your founders, and you're also supporting the corporate teams. Let them shine. By working with us, one thing we can give to people in the organizations, in the corporations that want to take risks, is to give them a place to shine. We can give them an exposure that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So, and I think this belongs to them. Let them shine internally. Let's work for the founders and for them to make things happen. I would say those three things probably helped me a lot in the last couple of years.
We have had someone else say that on the podcast as well, exactly that. As a CVC, the last thing you can do is claim the success of the corporate, so to say, or the corporate champions that inside. You really need to be humble around that, because otherwise you'll create antibodies to what you're doing. And it's actually a great opportunity and something that can attract the rest of the corporate to work with you if you give them these wins.
Exactly. I think that's we have to be, and we know. I mean, sometimes venturing attracts people with
Yes.
ego, so it's it can be tricky.
Yes, yeah, right. It doesn't align too well, but that's also normal venture for you. Big egos are not only a problem in CVC.
Yeah. I mean, I have had my time as founder. That's where I was the main
Actually,
stage.
I'd love to ask you a bit about this, because in our notes for this, you oftentimes mention being founder friendly and the importance of working alongside the founders and taking the founder point of view. Maybe you can talk a bit to that and the importance of your own entrepreneurial experience now that you're at a corporate doing venture.
Yeah, so that's not only me. I think that is our principle, right, at Wayra, of being created by founders for founders. We've said that many times, and we mean it. We always take every one of us. We always take the founder point of view in the relationship with Telefónica, and that's what Telefónica asks us to do. There are enough people in the organization looking after the corporate interests. I mean, we know the balance of power between corporates and startups in many cases, right? So our mandate is to take their point of view. So we are super founder friendly in terms of in our investment terms, but also on how we deal with the startups in regards with the business developments they do with Telefónica. We have a separate team, so there's no flow of information between the Wayra team and Telefónica other than what the startups wanted to flow, right? What we learn as an investor, the commercial teams, they don't know, right? We don't have many board seats. We never lead a round. By design, we never lead. We have some even restrictions on our total shareholding of the company. We can take board seats, but we typically don't. More don't than do. In part because those companies are developing relationships with commercial relationships with Telefónica, and we want them to develop. So we want to avoid conflict of interest.
Yeah, I can definitely get that. Makes a ton of sense. And we've also had stories on the podcast, Jeppe being one of them also, who have had like long periods of a startup's life where they've had to step out of the board entirely because too many things were weaved together with the corporate.
Because of the sector as well, a lot of companies that we invest, they will end up working with other telcos, many of them, in different countries, in different geographies, but not always. I mean, the large telcos, they have presence in multiple markets. So we don't want our presence in the cap table to be in a problem, to be in an impediment. And I have had this conversation with many founders many times, because we are from all the telcos and the telco CVCs, Telefónica tends to be the one that come earlier. We invest in earlier stage than most other telcos. So we're usually the first telco to join a cap table. Very often, in some of our best cases, we are the first telco, and then many other telcos join in subsequent rounds. So that's a good validation. But that's a conversation I've had with founders many times, that they are worried, will having Telefónica in my cap table prevent me from doing business with others. We have never seen that case because of the way we operate, our posture, our behavior. I think it also helps that it's not part of our strategy to acquire the companies we invest in. We typically never do it. I think we've done a couple times, but it's like extremely, extremely rare. Right?
Yeah. Nah, but that's also yet again another thing that aligns with the rest of the learnings we've had on the CVC series so far. Finally, I want to ask you a bit of a surprise question. Is normal telco going to be completely disrupted by satellite infrastructure and maybe specifically X's Starlink or SpaceX's Starlink?
Yeah, but I don't think so. It is a disruption to the industry. I think technology-wise, we're still very, very far. And I mean, one thing that happens as well, if you think the needs for connectivity, bandwidth, low latency, speed in general, they increase substantially as we evolve. So the networks get faster. We don't necessarily notice because the products we use today, they require the bandwidth we have today, and the products we had a few years ago, we forget. But if you look at a streaming, the quality that you would have 10 years ago was completely different than the quality that you have today, because the networks didn't support it. So I think it's an important disruption, but I think where we are right now, the technology is still far, and the needs for bandwidth will probably outpace that. So it may have some use cases, but I think it's not going to be completely disrupted. Before the smartphone, telcos used to control the interface. The interface of the client was controlled by the telcos until some years ago, 15 years ago, right? If you had a phone from one telco, it would not work on the other network. What you would see on the menu was different, and so on. And that the smartphone changed that, and that changed the industry dynamics a lot in terms of commoditization of the connectivity, which is a trend. I don't think right now that a satellite will be a disruption of that order of magnitude. I think the connectivity need will outpace the technology development.
Yeah,
but
interesting.
Who knows?
Well, I had to ask you, Bruno, even though we were coming up at the end of our time. I had to ask you because it's something I'm thinking about. Bruno, thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Thank you, Andreas. It's been a great pleasure. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, man.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with ACE Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.